Ever feel like you're like drowning in clutter? You know,
Yeah.
one of those days where you're like, okay, I'm going to tackle Mount Laundry today, but then somehow you end up like organizing your sock drawer instead.
Oh, I know that feeling. It's like our brains have this built-in resistance to organization sometimes.
Totally. Well, get ready to rewire those brains because in this deep dive, we're tackling the weird and sometimes kind of funny reasons we struggle with organization. And we've got a stack of interesting research to help us out, including this source, Wikilajoni text.
Oh, yeah, that one's full of fascinating insights. What I find really interesting is that it's often less about, the how of organization and way more about understanding what's going on in our heads.
Right. It's like there's this mental game being played. Speaking which, the source talks about this idea of perfectionism's paradox, which I know about you, but that really resonates. I can totally get stuck in that loop of needing things to be like flawless, and then I just end up frozen and don't do anything.
Oh, absolutely. And the research actually backs that up. It turns out that striving for excellence, great. But needing things to be perfect, that can be a one-way ticket to procrastinationville.
Procrastinationville, population, all of us.
Right. But seriously, there was this one study that found a ridiculous 88% of workers admitted to procrastinating for at least an hour every single day.
An hour a day. Is my math right? That's like,
It's a lot. We're talking roughly $15,000 in lost productivity per employee per year just from procrastinating.
okay, wow. That is a sobering statistic. But okay, here's where things get kind of interesting. The source also suggests that there might actually be, wait for it, some surprising upsides to procrastination.
It sounds crazy, but it's true. Moderate procrastination, done right, can actually be kind of beneficial. Think of it like this. It's a pressure valve for your brain.
Okay, I'm listening. Tell me more about this productive procrastination.
Well, sometimes, that looming deadline, it can actually help you focus like crazy when you finally sit down to do the work.
So you're saying there's hope for us chronic procrastinators after all.
There's always hope. But, and this is a big but, it's about finding that sweet spot. That balance between using procrastination strategically and, letting things totally spiral out of control.
So how do we walk that tightrope? What separates good procrastination from the kind that leaves a trail of chaos in its wake?
Setting clear deadlines. Having a firm due date, even if it's self-imposed, it just makes it way harder to justify pushing things aside.
Deadlines.
Yeah.
The ultimate motivator, even if we love to hate them. But deadlines aside, how do we deal with all the distractions? Like, the internet is basically a procrastination playground.
Ugh, tell me about it. Minimizing distractions is key. Putting your phone on DND, silencing notifications, even using those website blockers. It all helps.
Boundaries are essential. Okay, so we've talked perfectionism, we've talked procrastination, but what about those times where we feel stuck, Like there's this invisible barrier stopping us from being organized.
Ah, yes. That's where understanding these hidden mental barriers can be a game changer. The source dives into this really interesting concept called learned helplessness. Ever feel like no matter how hard you try, you're just destined to be disorganized?
Ugh, yes. Like it's a lost cause. I might as well just surrender to the clutter.
Right. And that feeling, it can often come from past experiences where maybe like our attempts to be organized failed or we were criticized. And it's like our brain internalizes that feeling and starts believing, well, I'm just not capable of being organized.
It's like our own brain is secretly sabotaging our organizational efforts.
Totally. But here's the thing. Even small wins can make a huge difference.
So how do we flip the script? How do we go from feeling helpless to feeling empowered when it comes to getting organized?
Celebrate those small victories. Did you clear off a corner of your desk? Win. Did you finally tackle that pile of mail? Another win. Recognizing those tiny steps forward, it helps to rewire our brains and reminds us that we are capable of change.
It's like giving ourselves permission to celebrate the journey, not just the destination. Because, let's be real, getting organized can sometimes feel like a never-ending journey.
Totally. And that's why it's so important to be kind to ourselves along the way. But learned helplessness isn't the only hidden barrier we might bump into on our quest for, organizational bliss. There are a few other sneaky psychological traps that can trip us up.
Oh, I'm all about exposing those sneaky traps.
Huh.
What else do we need to watch out for?
Well, there's this thing called the sunk cost fallacy. This is where we cling to things, physical clutter, outdated systems, simply because we've already invested time, money, energy.
So that's why I have a closet full of clothes I never wear. I'm like, well, I spent money on them, so I can't get rid of them.
Exactly. It's that I've invested too much to give up now, feeling even when letting go would be the best thing.
It's like our brains are wired to make organization a challenge.
Right. And then there's the planning fallacy, which is basically our tendency to underestimate how long tasks will actually take.
Oh, I'm so guilty of that one. I'm like, yeah, I can totally write a novel in a weekend. Famous last words.
It gets us every time. And then there's the endowment effect, which basically means we value things more simply because we own them.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. It's not just about the sentimental value. It's like this weird psychological attachment we have to our stuff.
Precisely. And being aware of these biases, it's crucial because it helps us make more conscious choices about like how we organize our time, our spaces, even our thoughts. But before we dive into all that, we have to talk about another big one when it comes to organization: decision fatigue.
Decision fatigue, it's a real thing, especially in our world where we're constantly bombarded with choices.
Absolutely. And the research shows just how much decision fatigue impacts our ability to stay organized. It's like our brain gets tired from making choices.
Oh, 100%. It's like why at the end of a long day, I can stare into my closet for an hour trying to decide what to wear.
Exactly. And it's not just the small stuff. When we're mentally fried from making decisions all day, it's way harder to prioritize tasks, organize our schedules, or even just tidy up.
It's like our brains just say, nope, we're done making choices for today.
Ah.
So how do we fight back against this decision fatigue, before it totally derails all our organizational dreams?
Well, one really effective strategy is to try tackling those big brain-heavy tasks earlier in the day, when you've got that fresh brain energy. Basically, get those tough decisions out of the way first.
Front load those decisions. I like it.
Right. And another thing that can help is creating routines and systems, so you're not constantly having to make so many decisions. Like maybe you meal prep for the week or you lay out your clothes the night before. Anything to streamline your day.
Work smarter, not harder. Right. Okay, but hold on a sec, because we haven't even touched on how anxiety plays into all of this.
Yeah.
And I have a feeling that anxiety and disorganization, they're like besties.
You are so right. The source actually talks about this, how anxiety and disorganization can become a bit of a vicious cycle.
Okay, yeah, tell me more about that. How does anxiety actually, look like disorganization?
So picture this. You've got this task you need to do, right? Let's say it's tackling a mountain of paperwork.
The worst.
But instead of feeling motivated to just get it done, you're hit with this wave of anxiety, like, ugh, it's just so overwhelming.
Oh, I know that feeling. It's like my to-do list suddenly turns into like this insurmountable monster.
Exactly. And then what happens?
Procrastination station, here I come.
Right. Instead of facing that anxiety head on, it's easier to just push it aside and be like, ugh, I'll deal with it later.
And of course, then we just feel worse later because we're even more behind, and the anxiety spirals. It's like a never-ending loop.
Exactly. It's a trap. And it's not even just about procrastinating on tasks either. Anxiety can totally mess with our ability to make decisions about how to get organized in the first place.
Oh, 100%. It's like if I'm already feeling anxious, then trying to decide like what to keep and what to toss when I'm decluttering, forget it. I'm totally paralyzed.
And that's the thing. The source talks about how when we're anxious, our brains basically go into this like fight or flight mode.
Oh, no, not fight or flight.
Right. And when that happens, our brains are not exactly in the best state to be making those rational decisions about like prioritizing or organizing.
So it's like anxiety hijacks our organizational brain power.
Exactly. And we end up stuck. We can't move forward because we're too busy freaking out about making the wrong decision.
So how do we actually break free from this anxiety organization trap? Because it sounds seriously tough to escape.
Well, it all starts with awareness, like just recognizing that anxiety is playing a role in our disorganization. That's huge because it allows us to start addressing the anxiety itself instead of just the symptoms.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do we actually do that? How do we tame the anxiety monster so it doesn't sabotage our organizational efforts?
Well, mindfulness practices can be a game changer. Things like meditation or even just taking some deep breaths. And something else that's super important is challenging those negative thought patterns that often fuel anxiety in the first place.
So instead of letting my inner critic run wild with those I'll never get organized thoughts, I need to talk back to it.
Yes. Give yourself a little pep talk. Remind yourself that everyone struggles with this stuff. It's okay to ask for help. And remember, progress over perfection.
Progress over perfection. I love that.
Yeah.
It's such a good reminder that, It doesn't have to be perfect, and we don't have to do it all alone. And, it really highlights how connected all of this is, right? Our mental well-being and our ability to stay organized.
Totally. It's not just about having the right systems in place, it's about cultivating that right mindset too. And that brings us to what I think is like one of the most important takeaways from all of this research. Organization, it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing.
So you're saying there's no right way to be organized. It's more about finding what works for me, my own, organizational style.
Exactly. It's all about experimenting a bit, trying different things and figuring out what clicks with you, your personality. And speaking of finding what works, remember we were talking about procrastination before and how maybe it's not always a bad thing.
Ooh, yes. The whole good procrastination thing. I definitely want to hear more about that.
Well, the research suggests that those intentional breaks, even if they involve like doing something else for a bit, they can actually make you more productive in the long run. It's like you're giving your mind permission to wander, to make those unexpected connections, and then you can come back to a task feeling refreshed.
It's like hitting the reset button instead of forcing yourself to work when you're, totally fried.
Right. Sometimes the most productive thing we can do is actually step away from the to-do list and just like let ourselves chill out for a bit, guilt-free.
So what you're saying is a little strategic procrastination might actually be the key to, unlocking my organizational superpowers.
It's definitely possible. And I think that's a great takeaway, Since even a little procrastination can be beneficial, how can you build those intentional breaks into your day? Think of it as a way to prevent burnout and just take care of your mental well-being.
I love that. It's like giving ourselves permission to slow down. And it totally changes how we think about procrastination. Maybe it's not the enemy after all, more like a tool we need to learn how to use.
Exactly.
This deep dive has been amazing. I feel like I have a whole new perspective on organization.
Hmm.
It's not just about, buying cute containers. It's about understanding what's going on in our brains.
It's been great chatting with you about all this.
And to all our listeners out there, remember, ditch the guilt, embrace your organizational quirks, and most importantly, progress over perfection. Until next time, happy organizing.